and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to today's Ancient History Question Answer session for Target Prelims 2024. So here we have selected some such questions from ancient Indian history which have been created deliberately by bringing in some elements from current affairs, that is, any recent new archaeological discovery that happened in India in the recent past, any new finding which corresponds with Indian architecture, art, or any history, dynasty. So here we are combining the static ancient history portion from India as well as certain recent developments in this regard, and all these questions shall help you in finding critical inputs for the upcoming UPSC CSE exam. So here we begin with looking at the very first question of the day, and this talks with regards to a region now which was very critical for multiple dynasties, in fact, in the ancient Indian history era. The question says, the area developed, now the area that we are talking about, it developed after the post-Harappan period, that is the mature Harappan civilization period. There are evidences which relate to the presence of Shaka king Apollodatus, which have been found in this region. Apart from that, this area was also called as Anarthpur or Anandpur in ancient Indian times. Now there is another clue. It says that this area was described by the very famous traveler who came to India known as Huinsang. He called this area also and he pointed to its relevance. So now, as per these clues, based on all these hints, we need to identify which is this city which also, as per research, is known as the oldest living city of India. Now it's very easy to confuse with the options here because among the questions we also have a name of Varanasi. Very often Varanasi corresponds with one of the most ancient cities that has existed in India. But here, when we look at clues like this area being described by Huinsang. Now let's also remember that Huinsang was the traveler who had visited the court of Harshvardhan, a very famous ruler from the Pushya Bhuti dynasty. Right. Apart from that, we are also saying that this area was referred to as Anarthpur. And once we know the answer, it's also very interesting to know that even today, this area has a lot of relevance for India. So the options here are A. Varanasi, is it B. Lothal, is it C. Rangpur, or is it D. Vadnagar? You could also have a quick look at the map corresponding to the location of Vadnagar. So here is the Kutch area, the Saurashtrian region, and here near the banks of river Sabarmati, that corresponds to the extreme western part of India, we find the city of Vadnagar. So collecting all these hints and clues together, clearly the answer here is D. Vadnagar. Now let me also tell you interestingly that today, when we talk about our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Modi, his native is also associated with Vadnagar. So that's a very interesting fact which will help us remember the name. Apart from that, let's also remember that Vadnagar in the ancient times was in fact known as Anandpur, Anarthpur, in fact few other names as well. So evidence relates even to the presence of Apollodatus, his visit to the region. Now when we look at other options here, particularly say Lothal and Rangpur, it's good to remember that these two sites are also very critical from the perspective of Indus Valley Civilization, IVC, the Harappan culture, the first urban culture of India. So you might have read while studying your IVC that Lothal in Gujarat was a port city of Indus Valley Civilization, also very, very important for the exam because it is in Lothal that a dockyard was found. Apart from that, there are remains of rice husk from Lothal, and apart from that, normally in the Harappan culture there has not been a predominance of rice usage, so therefore Lothal is relevant there. Also, some people have pointed out the presence of fire cult in Lothal. And then even Rangpur, situated in Gujarat, was also a very important site of the IBC. So from that we can remember that while these two correspond with IBC, talking about Vadnagar, it was referred to with the name of Anarthpur in ancient India. Now with this, let's proceed with the second question here. And again, it is a set of few statements. It says in the first statement that the site of Ashoka's inscriptions at Kalsi is very unique, as it is the only place in North India where the great Mauryan emperor, that is the Emperor Ashoka, has inscribed a set of 14 rock edicts at one place. The second statement says, the language of these edicts is Kharoshthi and Brahmi. Now, interestingly, let's understand that while many of Ashoka's rock inscriptions, pillar inscriptions both, the set of major ones and minor ones are important, but there are few which command special relevance. For example, when you talk about the Rock Edict 13, we relate this with the Kalinga War that Ashoka had fought back in 261 BC, and after that he completely changed his ideology, got converted into Buddhism, so a very, very relevant war there. Apart from that, we must remember that in the modern state of Karnataka, we have a place called Kanganahalli, as well as a place called Maski, where we find edicts from Ashokan period. And both of these were unique because these are the only places where the name Ashoka has been mentioned. Because normally otherwise, when we see other inscriptions, Ashoka has been referred to with the name of Piyadasi or Deva Nama Piya. That is very popular among people and the beloved of gods. That's the title that he used to bore. But in the Karnataka inscriptions, we find names like Ranyo Ashoka. So the name Ashoka comes out very clearly. Now, all that apart, coming back to Kalsi. Now, Kalsi inscription is situated in the modern day state of Uttarakhand. In fact, this place is very, very near the capital city, Dehradun. So, indeed, this is the place which is supposed to be unique because it has a set of 14 rock edicts inscribed. So the first statement here is valid. Now looking at the second statement, it says the language of these is Kharoshthi and Brahmi. So it's good to remember that across Indian subcontinent, most of the Ashokan pillar inscriptions, rock inscriptions have been put down in either Pali or in Prakrit, of course, in Brahmi script. But it's only when you talk about the extreme northwest India, that's the area of Kandahar, that's the area near India-Afghanistan border. That's where certain inscriptions have been found which were unique for being bilingual. So there we find certain uses of languages like Kharoshthi and even Aramaic script. Sometimes it's mixed with some kind of Indo-Greek elements as well. So that's very unique. But apart from that, across other places in India, it's either Prakrit or Pali. So here, the second statement then is not correct because the Kalsi inscription will be in Pali, and here Kharoshthi is misplaced. So we can say here only one statement is valid, making A your correct answer. And here there's a brief look about how the Kalsi inscription looks like. A lot of efforts are being done by the ASI to conserve it, being one of the very rare and unique such Ashokan heritage sites in India. With this, the third question here comes again as a set of 3 statements, and we need to figure out which of these are valid, which of these are true. The first statement says the people of Bengal, they used to build huge boats. The purpose, of course, was to carry on sea trade and navigation, and these boats were known as boitas. With the help of these, they would carry trade with the Indonesian islands. Is that a correct statement? It's just partially correct, actually. The second statement says that Tamral, Ipiti and Manikpatna, Chelitalu, Palur, Pituanda, all these are some of the major ports of Indian region, while the third statement says Bali was a part of 4 islands that were together. It's an archipelago, that is a set of many small islands very near to each other. So this entire archipelago of 4 islands was collectively referred to with the name of Suvarnadeep. And today, of course, it's known as Indonesia. So how many of these statements would be valid? Let's have a look at the first statement. Agreed that boitas were big boats and they were created for the purpose of navigation and sea trade, but they were not built by the people of Bengal. In fact, they were created by the people of Kalinga. That corresponds to modern day Odisha. So therefore, the first statement here will not be valid. Now, apart from that, these ports which we are mentioning in the second statements indeed are all the ports that do exist in the Indian region, and interestingly, they were found as far back as 4th or 5th century BC. So they were that old. All these were situated in the Indian region for the purpose of navigation trade, making second statement correct. The third statement, it says Bali was a part of certain such islands called Swarnadip. Now, yes, indeed, all these islands collectively were referred to as Swarnadip, and the third statement once again here becomes absolutely correct. So which means from the above set of 3 statements, only 2 statements will be correct, making B as your right answer. Now here is the map where we can have a look quickly, and we were referring to a set of islands that are situated in this region, and all the ports that we referred to were used to carry on trade among these territories. So this region here was the main navigation channel that was being referred to in the question. With this, let's have a look at the next question. It's coming as a set of statements once again, 3 statements, and the first one says it's about Buddhist councils actually. So for the exam's perspective, it is good to remember all the Buddhist councils that were held, that is, under which king were they held, at which place were they held, and who were the people who presided over these councils. So on that note, the first statement says the 4th Buddhist Council was conducted under the patronage of King Kanishka, the very famous Kushan ruler from India. And second statement says this was held in the 1st century AD, where? At Kundalwana in Kashmir. Third statement, the council was presided over by Vasumitra and Ashwaghosha. So, which of these statements is wrong then? Well, none of them are wrong, because indeed the 4th Buddhist Council was held by Kanishka. Let's remember that. Kanishka was a major proponent of the Mahayana school of Buddhism, that is known as the Greater Wheel, as opposed to the Hinayana, that is the Lesser Wheel. So Mahayana happened when many other foreign and non-Buddhist elements eventually seeped into the traditional conservative form of Buddhism. Hence, the Greater Wheel Mahayana, and it was of course, Ashoka was one such king who majorly expounded Buddhism. But then apart from that, it was under Kanishka also that Mahayana Buddhism was very, very popular. So the first statement is valid. The second statement that it was held in Kashmir is also correct. And the third statement that it was held under the presidency or the supervision of Vasumitra Ashwaghosha, absolutely valid statement. So we can say yes, all the 3 statements here are correct, and D is your valid answer. Now on that note, it's also good to quickly recall therefore that where then was the 1st Buddhist Council held? So the 1st Buddhist Council was actually held under Ajatashatru. Let's remember he was the prince, rather the king of Haryana dynasty. He was the son of the very famous king Bimbisara. So it was under him. And where was this held? It was held at a place called Rajgir, a place where these people had created such a tightly secured mountain valley that nobody from outside could have actually entered Rajgir. It was created as a very protected zone by Ajatashatru and his father and the founder of Haryana dynasty, that's Bimbisar, King Bimbisar. Now the second council, if we talk about, was held under the aegis of King Kalasoka of Sisunaga dynasty. This was held at Vaishali. Talking about the third one. The third one was held under the aegis of nobody other than King Ashoka, and it was held at Patliputra. Right? So it's good to remember all these councils, and also it's very important to understand which all kings had actually been avid followers of Buddhism. So here clearly the name of Kanishka and Ashoka, it stands out loud, making D your correct answer. With this, the next question is quite an easy one. In fact, it says Queen Nayanika. She wrote a very famous inscription that's called the Nane Ghat inscription. So this inscription is referring in fact to which king? And the king whom she has described in this inscription has been referred to as Dakshina Pathapati. So who is this person being referred to here? So which king are we referring to? Is it A, Vashishtaputra Puluyami? Is it B, Satakarni I? Is it C, Hala? Or is it D, Gautmiputra Satakarni? Easy question, but sometimes it can be confusing because of course in Satvahana dynasty as well. Now we are talking about Satvahana dynasty who, according to Puranas, were actually the Andhras. Interestingly, the word Satvahana is not used in the Puranas, but people say that these were the Andhras who actually were almost like the feudatories of Mauryas. Now here the Mauryan Empire was declining, and in the southern India, these people were the immediate successors, in fact. Also, let's remember that Satavahanas broadly covered the areas of modern-day Andhra Pradesh and certain parts of Maharashtra. There are very few unique things apart from Satvahana dynasty which we should remember, but before that, what is the valid answer here? So the correct answer here will be B. King Satakarni I. Let's remember that Queen Nayanika was the consort. She was the queen of Satvahana king. In fact, one of the most popular Satvahana kings known as Satakarni I. She was in fact believed to be the first woman to have her face inscribed on Indian coins. And this inscription we are talking about is situated near the modern day Pune in Maharashtra. So here she has really expounded the great virtues of her husband Satakarni I and told how he has defeated various rivals and he stands out as a brave king. So B will be the valid answer. Now quickly talking about the Satvahana dynasty. Now often Satvahana means 7 wheels. Right. Let's also remember that there were certain unique things about these people. One very unique thing was that they share a lot of similarity in administration and social structure with Mauryas. Second thing, let's remember Satavahanas were in fact the first people to start the practice of giving large land grants to Brahmins and Buddhist monks. Let's also remember that Satavahanas were the first people to produce coins which carried the image of the king. On that note, the founder of Satvahana dynasty was Simuka. Simuka was then followed by another very famous king by the name of Krishna, to be followed by Satakarni I, the real founder of Satvahana dynasty, to be then followed by Hala. Now, Hala is also very, very popular because he is very famous for his poetic works, right? In fact, under him, we also know that some beautiful poetic works and literature was created. Apart from that, there's another very unique thing to remember, that at a time in India where most dynasties were very patrilineal, it was the Satvahana kings who were known for taking titles from the name of their mothers. So there was an element of matrilineal in this dynasty, where we find kings taking the name of their mothers, such as Gautami Putra Satakarni. Now his mother was known as Gautami Balasri. So behind him he took the name Gautami Putra, which means son of Queen Gautami. So this was a very distinctive feature about these kings. Also Vishishtiputra Pulayami. Also let's remember that it was Gautami Putra Satakarni who used to call himself as the only Brahman. He gave himself the title of only Brahman and persecutor of Shakas. Shakas were their main rivals. And on that note, do remember that from the point of view of Satakarni dynasty, the Satvahana dynasty and the King Satakarni I, it's very important to have a quick revision of the art and architecture related to Satvahana period. Quite important from the perspective of art and culture. For this question, B is the valid answer. Let's move to the next question, a set of 3 statements again, and we need to find out which of these is correct. The statements are: 1. King Kumaragupta had taken the title of Mahendraditya. B. Or 2. Chandragupta I had ruled over the Vakataka kingdom after he married his daughter to a Vakataka prince known as Rudrasena II in the Deccan area. The third statement says Dhanvantri had written the famous books Rognidan and Vaidya Chintamani. So which of these are valid? Now I'm sure after reading the names of these kings, you know that somewhere we are talking about the Gupta dynasty, and the founder of Gupta dynasty was, yes, it was Sri Gupta. Now many people confuse this actually with Chandragupta I. No, that's not correct. It is in fact Sri Gupta. Although one of the most ambitious kings of the dynasty, who is also referred to as the real founder of Gupta period, was Chandragupta I. So is the first statement that says King Kumaragupta had taken the title of Mahendraditya valid? Yes, it is a valid statement. In one of his coins, the title Mahendraditya clearly stands out for King Kumaragupta. Let's also remember that Kumaragupta was a very ambitious ruler of Gupta dynasty. He had taken many important titles such as Maharaja Dhiraja, such as Param Bhattaraka, Param Advaita, and one of those titles was also Mahendraditya. Not just that, Kumaragupta is also very famous in history for giving patronage to the very famous center of learning known as the Nalanda University. Okay? Much later, it was devastated by a ruler called Bakhtiyar Khilji. So also these are some tiny facts which are quite important for prelims. So he was the person who gave his, you can say, complete support for establishment of Nalanda University. Now, coming to the second statement, it says Chandragupta I, a very, very well-known king of Gupta period, had ruled over the Vakataka period. It's correct because Chandragupta I was also somebody whose chief queen was known as Kumara Devi. Now, they had a daughter known as Queen Prabhavati. He married his daughter Prabhavati to a well-known Vakataka king Rudrasena II. But unfortunately, King Rudrasena II died early. And because of that, Queen Prabhavati, his daughter, was left with a minor son. Hence, it was Chandragupta I who, in the name of his daughter Prabhavati, had taken over the reins of complete Vakataka region in the Deccan area. So the second statement here again becomes valid. Coming to the third statement, now we are talking about Dhanvantri. So who is Dhanvantri? Now let's remember that after Chandragupta I, after Samudragupta, we had another ruler of Gupta dynasty who is very, very important to remember, and he was Chandragupta II. In fact, in history, he has been referred to as Chandragupta II Vikramaditya because he took the title of Vikramaditya. He is also very popular because in his court we had gems, famous proponents of art, architecture, culture, music, and one of these gems of his court was Dhanvantri. Dhanvantri had written famous books with regards to various disease cures and various kind of other such curative researches for various human diseases and ailments, and two of these books were Rog Nidan and Vaidya Chintamani. So all three statements here are valid, and we can say D then is the correct answer. Even for Gupta period, we really need to remember a couple of things such as architecture. Architecture is very critical here. Let's also remember that Guptas once again are known for their extremely complicated social economic life, the very, very complicated caste social structure that evolved. Let's also remember there are certain inscriptions. For example, the Mehroli iron inscription. That inscription also is very critical with correspondence to Gupta period, right? And apart from that, even in the front of art and architecture, we should know that which temple, which monastery briefly came out during this time. Now, this is a general map, an overall map, which just shows the kind of area that had been established by the Gupta kings. Now, here clearly we can see that under Samudragupta, the entire stretch that corresponds to northwestern India, to the central India, and then to the eastern coast was under the commandership of Samudragupta. Now, Samudragupta was also somebody whom we should know thoroughly from the perspective of exams because he was a very, you can say, enthusiastic promoter of music, and therefore many of his coins in fact show him playing veena. He is also known as Napoleon of India. That's absolutely correct. So here the next question again comes in the form of three statements. Let's consider which of these are valid. The first one talks about Abdul Razak. It says Persian ambassador Abdul Razak had visited the Vijayanagar Empire back in 1443. Correct. We know Vijayanagar Empire, Harihar, Bukka, Mahanavmi, Tibba, all of that. So these are certain details about Vijayanagar that are important to remember. So Abdul Razak was a visitor who came to the empire of Vijayanagar, right, in 1443. And this happened during the time of Vijayanagar ruler Devaraya II. Is that correct? It's correct. Because yes, indeed, Abdul Razak, some people also call him Samarkandi. He came during the Vijayanagar Empire under Devaraya II, who was a ruler of Sangama dynasty. Now, when we talk about Vijayanagar, it was ruled by various clans, various dynasties, one after the other. For example, Sangama, Suluva, Tuluva, and then eventually Araividu. So, all these are important. In fact, one of the most outlying important kings of Vijayanagar was Krishna Dev Raya. Absolutely. Vijayanagar is also very important because you must also study thoroughly the battle of Rakshasa Kangadi or the battle of Talikota, correct. So first statement here is valid. Second statement, Marco Polo very famous traveler, had visited South India during the reign of Rudramma, Devi of Kakatiya dynasty. Is that correct? Indeed. Marco Polo in fact came to India 2 times, and when he reached India, that was broadly between the period of 1288 to 1292 AD. He chiefly came during the reign of Pandyas, the Pandyas of Madurai. Correct? Now, he also paid a visit to the ruler of Kakatiya dynasty. She was Queen Rudramma Devi. So hence second statement is also correct. Third statement, Al-Biruni, very famous traveler. He was one of the jewels in the court of Mahmud of Ghazni, and he authored a study of Indian culture known as Rihla. Does the statement look valid? Yes and no, because yeah, some of it is valid. Indeed, he did come with Mahmud of Ghazni to India. But after studying in detail Indian culture, Indian society, did he write a book called Rihla on India? No, he did not write the book called Rihla, because Rihla was in fact a book that was written by Ibn Battuta, the very, very famous Moroccan traveler to India. Al-Biruni has been credited with a book known as Kitabul Hind, where he has done an in-depth study, in detail study of Indian society, culture, social, political life and all of that. So third statement then becomes a problem. Now most of the questions in exam are deliberately devised in such a way that they are only partially correct. So when we are in a hurry, we would look at the statement, and seeing the first part of the statement, it's very easy to presume that yeah, it might be correct. But then it's important to understand the full statement thoroughly, because most of the times the mistake is always in one part of the big statement. So here clearly this is not the book that he wrote. So only the 1 and the 2 statements would be correct, and A should then be your right answer. Now moving on to another question. A set of 3 statements once more. Which of these are correct? 1. The Amravati school, which evolved on the banks of Krishna river in the South India under the patronage of Satvahana monarchs. Now, a very good and interesting thing to remember here would be that most of the times in prelims, when they give you a question based on ancient history, art and architecture, they generally give you randomly any name of a famous, say for example, school of painting, the Kangra school of art, the Mughal school of art, the miniature school of painting, the Pahadi school of art. There are so many. Whenever you read about these, it's extremely important, 1, to remember that which dynasty had patronized which art form. That's a very good way to remember. Second thing is, whenever you read about any dynasty, now these could be Satvahanas, you could be talking about Mauryas, you could be talking about, say for example, any dynasty, even Cheras, say Cheras of Kerala. A good thing is, let's use a map alongside, because whenever we understand how much territory of India was under the domination of a particular dynasty, every time we think of that dynasty, that map props up in the mind. So next time, any question based on that dynasty, whether it is about art architecture, whether it is about painting literature, whether it's about a particular temple or monastery, immediately your mind goes to the map. Something similar is happening here. In one of the previous questions on Satvahana, we were talking about how Satvahanas had captured the area near River Godavari. Most of this area was either in modern-day Andhra or in modern-day Maharashtra. So clearly, what are we talking about now? We are talking about banks of River Krishna in southern India under the patronage of Satvahana monarchs. This area clearly corresponds with Satvahana monarchs. So indeed, the first statement is related to Satvahana dynasty. Yes, Amravati school did evolve during the patronage of Satvahana dynasty. That's absolutely correct. Second statement, the Amravati stupas are made of striking white marble. Yes, this is something we need to remember particularly. For example, when you study the Mauryan art and architecture, it's good to remember that how Mauryas were the first people who started massive stone masonry. They were the first people to begin avidly the concept of rock cut architecture. Now, Mauryans were also very famous for using red sandstone or the buffed sandstone, most of which would come from Chunar, an area called Chunar, which is very famous for its red sandstone. These were certain distinctive things about Maurya. Similarly, when you talk about the Gandhara or Hellenistic art, you know that it had its special, some very, very special features, such as depicting Lord Buddha in a very muscular way, wavy hair, details about the bodily features of Lord Buddha. Similarly, talking about Amravati School of Art, they were very unique for using absolute white marble. So these are certain pinpoint details we must remember with correspondence to particular schools of art. So Amravati, white marble, indeed patronized by Satvahana monarchs. Now the third statement, Nagarjuna Konda, Goli, Gantasala and Vengi are some notable areas where this style evolved. Absolutely valid. Yes, it is all these areas which lie today in the Deccan area, corresponding to the modern day states of Andhra, where you will find all these examples of Amravati Stupa. So that much is more than enough. If you know who patronized the art, what is the most distinctive feature about the art, and where all in the modern day India do you find examples, or do you find creations of one particular art form. That's enough to cover one particular art. So here all three statements are correct again, and D will be your correct answer. Now on that note, there is a lot of confusion usually, say between the Gandhara school of art, between the Mathura school of art. Let's remember, whenever we use the word Gandhara, it's very important to remember that there will be certain influence from Persian art or Iranian art. Now if you remember, Iranian invasions in India did not happen just once, but in many, many waves. Remember long back, during, say, the periods of the Nanda dynasty, there was already a huge Persian influence that existed in northwestern frontier of India, right? Similarly, just when Mauryan Empire was going through its last few stages of evolution, we also had another wave of Indo-Aryans who came into India. And these people brought so many features with them. One particular feature they brought was Hellenistic features of art, right? Which was a blend between Iranian art and Indian art. So Gandhara is a very good example of that. So it will always be found in the northwestern frontier of India, particularly near the parts of, say, modern day Punjab, modern day Afghanistan, and they specialize in Buddhist artifacts and creations. They specialize in pinpointing. In extreme detail, they will highlight various physical forms of Buddha. Similarly, when you talk about Mathura art, now it's very, very prominently found in the Yamuna Bank area. This had developed mostly during the 1st and the 3rd century BCs. So you must remember a couple of these art forms, including, of course, the miniature art form, the Pahadi art form. So just 5 of these should be more than enough. And this is one picture taken from Amravati School of Art. You can see, interestingly, that how it's made up of complete white marble. Another thing is, not too much detail has been given into the physical bodily features of the figurines here, right? Although in Gandhara, Hellenistic, they will give very particular detailing of bodily features. You can see the curvy hairstyle and all of that. But here, nothing of that sort. Now, the next question, a set of statements based on Audhu verse. So let's see. What are we talking about? The first statement says, Audhu verse. They sing devotional songs in Hindu temples, and they can also enter the sanctum sanctorum. That's the main reverend part of the temple, inner part of the temple. Second, Audhu verse. They serve Lord Vishnu by singing praises, by singing hymns to praise him, as described in the Tirumurai. Third statement about them says, recently 15 Audhuvers have been appointed in Andhra Pradesh, including 5 women. So 5 women are also a part of these 15 Audhuvers. Let's see which of these statements are correct. The first thing is, who are Audhuvers? So when we talk about Audhuvers, we are talking about, you can say, people who sing devotional hymns in the praise of God. So typically, this is a practice very, very predominant in the state of Tamil Nadu, and they sing devotional songs for Lord Shiva. Technically, they are not the priests of the temple. They are not the priests. They just participate in the worship through providing devotional hymns, and therefore, since they are not the priest, they are also not allowed to enter the sanctum sanctorum. So clearly, the first statement here is not correct. Correct? Second statement, they serve Lord Vishnu. So typically, they are the Shaivite school of worship. So the second statement also becomes incorrect. The third statement says, Recently, 15 of them have been appointed in Andhra Pradesh, but they have actually been appointed in Tamil Nadu. It's a very famous cultural practice, religious practice of Tamil Nadu, where yes, 5 of them have been appointed as women devotional singers. So we can say none of these statements are correct, and D becomes your right answer, where none of these are proving valid. The next statement is with reference to World Sanskrit Day. Now we know that for the exam, approximately there are many important days in the year which we must remember. For example, we should know the day, International Day of Mother Tongue. We should know the International Day of Wetlands. We should know the International Earth Day, and so many of them. Similarly, talking more about something related to Indian tradition. Let's remember, when is the World Sanskrit Day celebrated? Apart from that, it is celebrated to pay tribute to which scholars among the following? Is it A, Katyayan? Is it B, Vishwamitra? Is it C, Panini? Or is it D, Kalidas? So let's understand a little bit about the Sanskrit Day. So the World Sanskrit Day was actually declared as long back as 1969 to honor the very famous Sanskrit scholar Panini. C will be your right answer. Now Panini's extremely well-known book, Ashtadhyayi. Typically, this day is celebrated every year, but on which day? On the full moon day of the Shravan month of Hindu calendar. In Hindi, it is also referred to as the Savan month, right? So the Shravan month of Hindu calendar. To celebrate, propagate the rich Sanskrit heritage of India, to also celebrate and propagate the contributions of scholars, particularly like Panini, to the development of India's rich literary culture. So here C is your valid answer. Now let's remember, since it is celebrated every year on the full moon day of Shravan Mass or Shravan month of Hindu calendar, the day changes from one year to another. It's not a fixed day every year. That's important to remember. So you should know about 2024. With this, the next question is coming up, and this is a set of 4 statements. Let's identify what do we mean by the word Tamiza Kam. So in the context of ancient Indian history, what does Tamiza Kam refer to? A, does it refer to a new culture that was developed as a result of contact between the Arabs and the people of South India as back as the 1st century AD? Is it B, another name for megalithic structures built around burials? Is it C, are we talking about the land between present-day Tirupati Hills and the southernmost tip of Indian peninsula, that's the southern India? Or D, are we talking about the name of a migrant tribe who had travelled from north to south during the 1st century BC? Clearly, the answer here is C. Now, when we say Tamikazam, we are talking about, in fact, to a geographical area, an area that was predominantly occupied by the Tamil culture, the prevalence of rich Tamil heritage and Tamil culture, the Tamil language speaking people. So therefore, in ancient Indian history, Tamikazam will always refer to that geographical part of India which predominantly has experienced the evolution of Tamil culture, making C your valid answer. On that note, there is another question here which says arrange the following statements in the order of time. So we need to begin from the very beginning and then see how these events evolved one after the other. Let's have a look at the first one. The first says statue of Yakshini found from Didarganj. Didarganj near Patna, Bihar is evidence of rich sculpture, architecture. But which dynasty are we talking about here? Yes, we are talking about Mauryan dynasty. So these are codes from where we can quickly find out the dynasty and then arrange them into the relevant period. Next is the 4th Buddhist Council. Now we just saw in one of the questions that 4th Buddhist Council was conducted under Kanishka, right? The Kushan king Kanishka in Kashmir. So we are talking about the Kushan dynasty clearly. Third, statue of Buddha found from Sultanganj. Now this Sultanganj also is in Bihar. It's a very, very famous place because from Sultanganj, a massive, huge statue has been found. right? It is still being displayed in one of the very famous museums, in fact. And this statue from Sultanganj that was found here was typically said to be created during the Gupta-Pala transition period in India. Now, in the end, we have the fourth statement, which says the first use of lost wax method in making idols. Now, does it remind you of something? When we say lost wax method, a typical method where first wax will be filled inside a particular object, and then once it solidifies, it can be taken out and the entire metal assumes the shape of the wax, and therefore it's a very primitive yet interesting way of making objects. Does it remind you of something? Yes, it should remind you of the IVC, the Indus Valley Civilization, because we know that out of the so many interesting objects, discoveries made in the Harappan culture, one very interesting thing was found from a chief or a key areas of this civilization, which is Mohenjo-daro. And from Mohenjo-daro, now we know that Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were the chief, most important sites here. So here, in Mohenjo-daro, we have found a very interesting bronze figure. Now, this bronze figure belongs to the bronze dancing girl figure. It's a very famous discovery at Mohenjo-daro, and this sculpture was created in a very rudimentary way, and it was made during the Harappan period by using the lost wax method. So, if the last one is IVC, now can we arrange them quickly in the order of how they came in the Indian, or you can say, subcontinent? It's now very, very easy. Of course, then we know that the first one will be 4. Of course, to be followed by whom? To be followed by the Mauryan dynasty. Please remember IVC, and then we enter the Rig Vedic area, the Rig Vedic period. Then comes the later Vedic period. Post later Vedic period, we enter the period of Buddhism, Jainism, we enter the period of Mahajanpad, the second phase of urbanization in India. The Iron Age started 5th, 6th century BC. From there, we see Mahajanpads, most important one, Magad. And then we see how various dynasties involved in Magad. Haryanika dynasty to be followed by Sisunagas. Sisunagas to be followed by then Nandas. Nandas to be followed by Mauryas. So of course the second is Maurya. Now next, when we talk about in the order of succession, we know that clearly the first, so right through elimination also we can save our time. Say for example, if fourth is the first one, we know only C and D can be correct and A and B cannot be correct. Now coming to the second one, which should be 1. Automatically we know D should be the right answer. We don't need to look any further, because if Mauryas were the next, then here comes B. So once you know that you are sure about 2 statements, we can also save time by eliminating the wrong options and selecting the right answer immediately. But apart from that, just for our understanding, the 4th Buddhist council, that's the Kushan period, will follow now. And in the end, of course, we have the Gupta period. An example is, yes, the statue of Sultanganj in Bihar that has been found. So clearly D would be your correct answer. So whenever, if at all they give you any question where they haven't mentioned any dynasty, but they've just mentioned, say, symbols of architecture, symbols of sculpture, any particular method, they could have also given you a question very easily that was based on something like, for example, during which period were districts referred to as bhuktis, or during which period did we have amatsyas, tirthas as the most important officials. So here immediately we have to decode that, okay, when we talk about tirthas, it has to be Mauryan period. We talk about bhuktis, it has to be Gupta period. So that map has to be very clear. Who came after which dynasty? And once you know the chronology, you can arrange them in the correct order. So here is the depiction of that huge Buddha statue that has been found from the area. It's right here from Sultanganj, and here is again a very simple depiction of how the lost wax technique works actually. You know how it enables you by filling it up with hot wax and then removing it. In the end you get a clearly well-shaped sculpture. With this, let's jump on to the next question. It is talking about Buddhist text. What does it say? It says, which Buddhist text points out that in the early stage of human society or human evolution, humans were living very happily. Why? Because there was no concept of private property, there was no concept of family, and we used to have a very tribal, a very joint living, and everyone was very happy. Eventually, gradually, they came to have private property. With private property came money. With private property came separate families, and then they began to fight over property. The same text also says they also began to fight over women. Hence, fights began when people started living a very individual nuclear life. So which text says that? Options are A, Abhidhama Pitaka. Is it B, Digha Niyaka? Is it C, Milind Panha? Or is it D, Deepa Vamsa? Now all these are very, very well-known Buddhist texts, but here the answer is Digha Niyaka. Why? Because clearly it is in the Digha Nayaka where it has been told that how in the beginning of human evolution, society was very happy. There was no problem, there was no reason to fight. But as property started getting acquired, people became enemies of one another, making B the correct answer here. Now, when we hear about Milind Panha or Milind Panho, this should remind you of a very interesting thing. Clearly, this is not the answer here, but if you remember, when Indo-Greeks were coming in India, one phase after the other, there was a point of time where there was a king called Milind. He interestingly met a Buddhist monk, a scholar whose name was Nagarjuna. Some people also call him Nagasena. He had a huge debate, in fact, a lot of discussion he had with the monk called Nagasena or Nagarjuna. He asked many questions, and the monk, the historical evidences say that the monk went on answering them, and eventually Milind got convinced about the beauty and the divinity of Buddhist religion, its philosophy, and hence the entire dialogue between them has been encapsulated in a book that is referred to as Milind Panho. So here it's not the answer, but it's good to remember what is Milind Panho. It was based on the life of King Milind. In fact, this king is also known as King Meander. Let's remember, King Meander. On that note, let's also remember that when we talk about Digha Nayaka, it was created about 2,700 years ago. And when we talk about the Abhidhamma Pitaka, now this in fact was compiled and finalized during the third Buddhist council that we all know was held during Ashoka's patronage. So here B is the valid answer. Now the next question says, rock carved paintings of Mahabalipuram, it's also called Malalapuram, known as Ganga Vatrana or Arjun's penance, some kind of repentance. This is believed to be a plot of Arjun's penance, and it has been taken from a very famous book referred to as Kirata Arjunayan or Kirata Arjunayam. Who is the author of this very famous book? Is it A. Kalidas? Is it B. Bhas? Is it C. Hastimal? Or is it D. Bharvi? Clearly here the answer will be Bharvi. The very famous book Kirata Arjunayam, let's remember, was composed by the scholar, thinker Bharvi. D here becomes your correct answer. Let's also remember that this Kirata Arjunayam is in fact a collection of certain epics, poems written in Sanskrit. Talking about the broad date, this happened during the 6th century BC, or some scholars claim even earlier than that. The next question, before that we can quickly have a depiction, a look of the Mahabalipuram, a depiction here. And now to the next question. Now we are talking about Sangam literature here. Now Sangam literature or Sangam period was in fact an era when some very rich Tamil literature got evolved. There were many schools of thought, or there was almost like a collection of many poets and scholars who came together and composed these hymns, literatures and texts, And today, many of them are, in fact some of them, they are so important that they give a very deep insight into the life and times of all the dynasties that existed during the Sangam period, including Pandyas, Cholas, we talk about Cheras, all of them. So here the question says, Tirukural, which is also sometimes called Kural. It is translated in English as sacred couplets. These are, or this is a classic Tamil text written by which of the following writers? A. Manikavakkar. Is it B. Tolkapiyar? Is it C. Tiruvalluvar or is it D. Sathanar? Now, whenever you hear the name Tolkapiyar, I'm sure it reminds you of Tolkapiyam. So, it will not be the answer here. Tolkapiyam is one of the most famous Tamil texts belonging to Sangam period, and it is typically dealing in Sanskrit grammar. Typically dealing in Tamil grammar. That's what it deals with. So, the author was Tolkapiyar. So, here it's not the answer. Here the correct answer is Tiruvalluvar. In fact, it is believed that Tirukural consists of around 1330 such couplets. An answer here will be Tiruvalluvar. That's C. Here is a statue of Saint Tiruvalluvar, the very famous Tamil scholar. And now on to the next question. The question says the famous Katarmal temple, built in the 9th century, is situated in which of these states of India? Now, before even we delve into the detail of Katarmal temple, it's important to remember. Say, for example, we all talk about the Konark Sun Temple of Odisha. We know it's also known as the Black Pagoda in India. So, most people remember this as the most well-known sun temple. Now, very little is known about another such temple referred to as Katarmal temple that was created in 19th century BC by a king who was known as Katarmala. He was a king of the very famous Katyuri dynasty. Now, this Katyuri dynasty was predominant in the state of Uttarakhand, in the Kumaon region of Uttarakhand. And the sun temple that's made here, the Katarmal Sun temple, it's very, very famous also because it's very unique in the way it has been created. In fact, it has been created by putting together a paste of lime and lentils. If you talk about popularity, it is second only to the very famous Konark Sun Temple of Odisha. So here D will be the valid answer. It is Uttarakhand, where Katarmal temple is situated in the Kumaon region. The next question says Kalanai Dam. Kalanai Dam, I'm sure you must have heard about many times, because when you study the location of various Indian dams, we know that Kalanai Dam in fact is the oldest known dam that was created in India. And where was it created? It was created on the river Kaveri in the state of Tamil Nadu. So the question says this Kalanai Dam, built across Kaveri river of Tamil Nadu, is the oldest dam in India, the first dam in India, but who made it? Under whose reign was it created? Is it A. Sengutuvan? Now, hearing the word Sengutuvan, we know that we are talking about somebody who is known by the name of Red Chera. Yes, he was a Chera king, and this king was known as the Red Chera. Cheras were also known as Kerala Putras. These were people who had their empire in Kerala. Very famous for their navigation into the sea. So, A here is not the correct answer. We are talking about the state of Tamil Nadu and Kaveri river. B. Parantaka Chola. Now, this could be the correct answer. C. Karikal could also be the correct answer. And D. Rajendravan. This could also be the correct answer because all these are Chola kings. So which of these is the right answer then? So here the right answer is C. It was Karikala who had made the Kalanai Dam across Kaveri river. Let's also remember a few other important things, such as it was made during the Chola dynasty. By King Karaikala. During 150 CE. Now, talking about King Rajendravan, he is also a very famous Chola king, but then he is known for something very important. Not the Kalanai Dam, but something else that's very important. What could this thing be? So, he is very famous for creating the temple of... Which temple was it? So, he is popular for making the very famous temple known as Gangai Konda Cholapuram, a very famous temple created by King Rajendravan of the Chola dynasty. But here, the correct answer is C, King Karikal. Now comes the next question as a form of 3 statements again, and let's pick out the valid one here. The first statement says Samet Shikharji. Sometimes it's only known as Shikharji. This is one of the holiest, most reverent pilgrimage sites for Jains in the Giridh district of Jharkhand. That is a correct statement. We all know it's a very famous pilgrimage site in Jharkhand. Second statement says it is located on the Parasnath Hill, the highest mountain in the state of Jharkhand. Well, this also is correct because the Parasnath Hill was also in the news. The government, whenever it tries to create any infrastructure in and around the hill area, it is the people who have objected to it, saying that it will lead to a degradation of a site that is very, very reverent to a lot of communities in India. So therefore, this is also correct. Yes, it is situated on the Parasnath Hill, which is also the highest peak of Jharkhand. So second statement is valid. Now, if first and second statement are valid, then naturally A and B will not be the answer. We can surely eliminate. When we know both of them are correct, then D can also not be the answer. So we should know that in that case, the only option is C, which should be the answer. But still, let's have a look at statement C. It says the Dilwara temples are a group of Shwetambara. Now we know that in Jain community, in the Jain denomination, there are 2 schools of thought, Shwetambara and Digambara. Here we are talking about the white-clad Shwetambara. And these temples are situated in Gujarat. Is that correct? Indeed, the Dilwara temples, which are situated on Mount Abu, are a very holy place, very famous temples in the Jain religion, agreed. But if they are situated in Mount Abu, then they are situated in Rajasthan, not in Gujarat. So anyway, the third statement was incorrect. And also remember that Mount Abu is very famous, also because it is one of the very few hill stations in Rajasthan, one of its only kind, in fact. So third statement then becomes invalid, making C your right answer. Both one and the second statement here are valid, not all of them. Now let's come to another question. It is based on Satvahanas, it seems, and it says consider the following statements here. The first one says Satvahanas were the earliest Indian rulers in India to issue their own coins with portraits of rulers on them. We just saw certain facts about Satvahanas. They were known as Andhras. They were almost like an extension in terms of their social cultural practices of Mauryas in South India. We know that the founder was King Simukka. We also know most famous king was King Satakarni one, and Gautamiputra Satkarni. We also know they had matrilineal elements, but we also studied, recently we saw in one of the questions that they were the first people to give land grants to Brahmins and Buddhist monks. But let's also remember that although they did not issue any gold coin, but they did issue a lot of coins in the Deccan area. Typically the coins were made up of potent lead. This is important because a lot of Satvahana rulers made lead coins, sometimes even silver, copper. These were the metals from which they used to make their coins. Also, they are very famous because these were the first people who made coins in such a way that the king's portrait was visible on the coin. That's very interesting here. So correct, the first statement here is absolutely valid, that although they issued only potent lead, silver and copper coins, but it's true that their coins did carry the image of their rulers. So first statement is valid here. If first statement is valid, then we can rule out D. Let's see the second statement before we proceed. Second statement says the Indo-Greeks were the first rulers in India to issue coins which can definitely be attributed to the kings. This is also a correct statement because it was Indo-Greeks in India who were the first people, in fact, to issue gold coins. Please remember, a lot of people associate gold coinage with Guptas, Kushans. Yes, indeed, even Kushans and Guptas did issue gold coins. Another interesting fact is that Kushan gold coins were even more pure in terms of the gold as compared to Gupta coins. So they also issued gold coins, but the very first people in India to issue gold coins were Indo-Greeks. Second, they were also the first people to issue coins in India which can definitely be attributed to the kings. Either the name or the dynasty was inscribed in these coins. Why was it happening for the first time now? It is because Indo-Greeks in India came immediately after The Mauryan Empire was in its last stages. But let's remember, when we talk about Mauryas, we know that Mauryas had an elaborate administration system. They had an elaborate economic system. But when we talk about coins, Mauryas were the people who were known to be issuing the punch-marked coins. You know that the second phase of urbanization in India that happened, say, almost during the period of Buddhism and Jainism, during the times of Lord Buddha. It was also almost the 5th and the 6th century BC when new Mahajanpads were coming up. When Iron Age was actually evolving in India, it was developing very fast in India. Towns were getting created. This is also the time where massive native industry was getting formed. So therefore coins were being used. But all these coins at that time were typically punch-marked coins. And punch-marked coins were made in such a way that they could not be attributed to any particular ruler. In fact, when we hear about Mauryan dynasty, we know they also used punch-marked coins, and their imperial currency in fact was one where on these punch-marked coins there were symbols like peacock, hill, crescent and all of that. But none of these were gold coins. None of these could be attributed to a king specifically. So once the era of, now this very another important thing before I forget, I must mention that sometimes these punch mark coins are also known as ahat coins. You can get a question. So ahat coins is also a name used for punch mark coins. But once Indo-Greeks came, they began the practice of issuing gold coins. One. Second, there were also the people to issue coins which now could be attributed specifically to the kings. In fact, not just this, Greeks were known to establish so many things in India. Now, if you remember, there was a custom of curtain, which is used in stage, theatre, Yavanika, that also came from Greeks. The system of satrapy, the satrapy system of governance, also came from Greeks. So, Greeks did bring about many elements of their culture in India, which also include sometimes the Hellenistic art features. Right? So therefore here at least both the statements are correct. So C will become your right answer. Now with this, here is a clear picture of how the coins at that time used to look like. You can see that they are slightly irregular. You can see that they have been created in such a way that mildly we can find some traces of symbols or some depiction here. So this is a very good example of the coins that were in prominence that time. The punch marked coins. Now with this, the next question. Which of the following options is incorrect? It's wrong. With reference to the social system during the Gupta period, the golden era of India, started by Sri Gupta. A. The number of Brahmin settlements called Agrahara or Brahmadeya increased during this period. Yes, in a way it's correct. Because we know, we just studied in fact, that Satavahanas were the first people to start the practice of giving massive tax-free land grants to Buddhist and Brahmin priests. With Guptas it only increased because Guptas were Brahmins predominantly. They were complete, you can say, Hindu dynasty, and they really paid a lot of respect to Brahmins. During the Gupta period we had flourishing caste system where the Brahmins would usually be on the top, then to be followed by the Kshatriya. So therefore they did believe in giving tax-free grants to Brahmins in forms of land and property. So very often they would give grants which are known as Agrahara. Some people also believe that Agrahara was grant that was given to Brahmins for their own use, for living, for propagating religion. But then Brahmadeya was also a kind of gift that was given to Brahmins for their personal use only. So both these typically were lands given to Brahmins. It's correct. It did increase during this time. B. During this period, there was a significant proliferation, which means a sudden rise and increase of caste into many subcastes. That's also correct. The caste system in India did become very complex at this time. There is a huge paradox also. So when we study social issues, it's good to remember that people say it was a very paradoxical period of Indian history. On the one hand, it was the golden period of India in terms of trade, navigation, economic development. On the other hand, when you talk about social, cultural status of society, the women's position was not very good. In fact, we do see evidences of child marriage, we see evidences of sati, we do see evidences of untouchability and caste system during that time. It's a paradox. On the one hand, we are gaining prosperity economically. On the other hand, this is also socially a slightly stagnant period of India. So we can say, yes indeed, the caste system became very aggressive during this time. We had untouchability. There are foreign travelers. For example, during the period of Chandragupta to Vikramaditya, We had a traveler known as Fahim who came to India, and he has documented that in India he did find cases of Chandalas, a particular division of society who were treated as untouchables. Whenever they would come inside a village, they had to play a drum or they had to tell the people that we are around, because their presence wasn't considered acceptable to the people of higher caste. So all these have pointed out to the presence of subcaste and complexities of caste. It's correct. See, during this period, women began inheriting some share of parental property. Now, this clearly is a misplaced statement. We just said that it was a backward period socially. So, it was a period where we do see that women were not doing anything in terms of education, anything in terms of occupation. There was no much social mobility available to women, and hence the concept of property inheritance, no. In fact, even in modern India, it's as recent legally as 2005. So, it's absolutely absurd to imagine that this could be true. Clearly, it is not right. D. Epigraphic evidence of Sati has been found from Iran pillar inscription of Bhanugupta of Madhya Pradesh. Absolutely correct statement. It's good to remember that it was during the reign of Bhanugupta, one later ruler of Gupta dynasty, that the Iran pillar inscription in Madhya Pradesh has also shown some references to the prevalence of Sati, the burning of widow, right? So, therefore, this is also correct, making C your valid answer. Why? Because we have to find the incorrect statement, and C is incorrect. With that, the next statement talks about Korkai. What is Korkai? Korkai, located on the banks of Tamiraparani River, was the principal center of trade and an important port of which of the following kingdom? Is it A. Vijayanagar? Is it B. Pandyas of Madurai? Is it C. Chera, Kerala Putra, Cheras of Kerala? Or is it D. Cholas? Cholas, we just spoke about Cholas. So which of these could be the correct answer? Now we are talking about Tamiraparani River. So what are we referring to? Which of these dynasties do you think could be containing? This is a slight technical glitch here. The pen doesn't seem to be working suddenly. Pen is an issue. Try once again. I'm apologetic for the slight pen issue. Okay, it's fine. Right, it's perfect. So we were talking about a question and we were discussing a principal center of trade and navigation, yes, an important port of which of the following kingdoms? So what do you think was the answer? So indeed, Korkai. In fact, there is another very famous one alongside Korkai. It's known as Tondi. So Korkai and Tondi, important ports existing during the period of Pandyas. Let's remember, for the Pandyas, the main area of concentration was in Tamil Nadu, the area called Madurai. Now, one question which you could definitely post an answer to in the comments section is, what was the symbol of Pandyas? Now, we know that all these dynasties in the Deccan Indian area, in the southern Indian area, they all had a symbol. For example, somebody had bow and arrow, somebody had the carp. So, which symbol did the Pandyas carry? So you can always post your answer. It's interesting to see, because sometimes in the prelims, say in the form of match the following or correct statements, they can give you the symbols associated with various dynasties too. So let's find out what was the symbol of Pandyas. On that note, We will proceed with another question here, and the question is a set of 3 statements. The first one is Kiladi excavation. Now, as I said, sometimes it's really good to see what new discoveries, what new excavations, what new archaeological findings are we conducting with regards to ancient Indian dynasties. So, for example, recently we did find something in Dholavira. We know that in Dholavira we found a signboard that was corresponding to the Harappan period, right? Similarly, back in 2015, there was some kind of findings at Kiladi. Excavations were done which prove that urban civilization was existing in Tamil Nadu during the Sangam age. Now, interestingly, a lot of people believe that IVC, Indus Valley Civilization, was when Indian urbanization actually started. Of course, the second phase came in 5th, 6th century BC, the third came with the British, and the fourth came typically in the globalization era, that's the post-independence era. Here we are talking about another such discovery which proves the existence of an urban civilization. This was found in Tamil Nadu back in 2015. So is that a correct statement? Did we find the Kiladi excavation which proved that there could be a degree of urbanization just like IVC of the Sangam age? Correct. It's a valid statement. These findings did point out to an urban civilization existing here. Second statement. The excavation also revealed an industry of dyeing and glass bead making. That's also a correct statement. Yes, interestingly, it was this place where many such kind of evidences were found that there was a proper dyeing industry that was being conducted here. There was evidence of glass making, bead making. So that's correct. In fact, if you would have read the news, you would have seen there were many oval-shaped, oblate-shaped, red kind of pearls kind of things that were found. These were referred to as the red glass beads that were found from this area. So yes, it is absolutely correct. Third statement, the discovery of large quantities of pottery. Very interestingly, we have found evidences of red ware, black ware, northern black polished ware. So many things that were attributed to urbanization in North India were also discovered here. So large quantities of various colored potteries which were found here, they also point out to the existence of pottery making industry that was mainly created by using the locally available raw materials. In fact, once this was found, people also said that probably there could have been some connection with the Harappan culture too. There were evidences found about that also. So which of these statements is valid? Well, all these statements are correct here. So D will be your right answer because all these are valid statements with regards to the Kiladi excavation. It's very interesting to read about, in fact, that how now archaeologists are creating a kind of link or relationship between the IVC and this particular dynasty, or rather civilization that existed in Tamil Nadu. So this is a picture that how the digging has revealed a kind of urbanized structure and dwelling of people here. With that, the next question says Gilgit manuscripts. Now, there are certain manuscripts which are supposedly one of the oldest discovered manuscripts in India, and they were created by coating these manuscripts with birch bark, which is like a bark of a tree, and clay. These were written between 5th to 6th century BC, rather AD, and we need to know out of the options which religion are these Gilgit manuscripts associated with. What could these be that were found dating back to say 5th, 6th century BC, and they are created in a very different way, like the bark of a tree and clay. That's the coating on them. Is it a Buddhism? Is it the Vedic religion? Could it be say Jainism, or is it the Islam religion? Remember, these are today being considered as perhaps oldest manuscripts. Let's also remember on that note that it is these manuscripts which are in nature both canonical and non-canonical. Plus, there's another thing about them. All these manuscripts that we are talking about from Gilgit, they also point out to the evolution of certain languages such as Sanskrit, in fact even Chinese, Korean, Japanese, plus many other philosophical works. So clubbing together all these evidences, then clearly these throw light on Buddhist works. So we can say answer here is a Buddhism. Yes, it is Buddhism, and Buddhist works which Gilgit manuscripts are dealing with, created in a very particular way with the bark of a tree, coated with lots of clay, and they point out to how Buddhist philosophy evolved. Apart from that, all these languages, one of the oldest known such discovered in India. Here is a small depiction of them. You can have a look at the pictures of Lord Buddha here. And now with that, let's proceed with the next question. The next question talks about a word called Chittirai. It says the word Chittirai, which was in discussion recently. This is the first month of which of the following calendars used in India? Is it A, the Hijri calendar? Is it B, the Parsi calendar? Is it C, the Telugu traditional calendar? Or is it D, Tamil traditional calendar? Here clearly the answer will be D, Tamil calendar. And let's remember, in the traditional Tamil calendar, often we say that the first month is referred to as Chittirai, rather Chithirai, and the ending or the last month would be referred to as Panguni. Right? So here the correct answer will be D. With that, there is another question coming up. Now this is just two statements. Let's find out that which of these are correct or valid. The first one says, Paryushna is an annual holy event. It's a religious event for Jains, which lasts for about more than a week. It's like 8 days. It lasts for 8 days. And it ends with the celebration of Samvatsari, the day of forgiveness, where people who believe in this school of thought, they ask for forgiveness for all the sins that they have done, for all the immoral deeds that they have done, consciously or unconsciously. So the practice is to then ask people to forgive them. So is statement 1 correct? Let's have a look at the second one first. Malinath is believed to be a woman named Malidevi by Shwetambara Jains, while in the Digambara school of thought, it's believed that all the 24 Tirthankaras were men, including Malinath. Now when you talk about Jain religion, we know that it is believed that there were 24 Tirthankaras. Now it's good to remember that the very first one was Rishabhnath. When we talk about Lord Mahavira, he was the 24th Tirthankara. When we talk about the 23rd Tirthankara, he was Lord Parsvanath. But here we are talking about one such Tirthankara who the Shwetambars believe, the white-clad followers of the stream of thought, they believe that it was in fact a woman named Malidevi. Whereas the Digambaras say that no, all these were only men and there was no woman Tirthankara here. So is that correct? Which of these statements is correct in that case? Let's look at the first one. Indeed, Paryushna is an annual holy event for Jains which lasts for about a week or 8 days, and then it ends by people fasting, not eating any food, and then asking for forgiveness from people regarding any sins that they may have committed. So the first statement here is absolutely valid. Let's look at the second statement now. So this statement here is also absolutely correct. It's true that for a lot of Shwetambaras, Malidevi was Malinath, a woman who was one of the Tirthankaras out of 24. But in the Digambara school of thought, it's not like that. They believed that all of these were men itself. So both the statements here then are correct, which means C would be a valid answer. Both one and the second statement become valid. This is an image, the depiction of Malinath. And with this, we come to an end of today's session. Today's session, which was based on various questions for ancient India. I hope the session helped you, and I will see you soon in future with many such other target prelims session, which shall be quite helpful for the upcoming exams. Thank you so much to all of you.